Hey guys, this is TheoryForge. We are on episode 28 now. And if you've seen Twitter, we are going to chat about different MMOs today and what works, what doesn't work, what we want to see, how these games are sustainable, and how the trending's going with different things. We've got on cam today, we've got Diggs, we've got Sog, myself, we've got Vel, and we've got Morgard today too to chat with us. So would you like to do a little bit of introductions for each person?
Sure.
Let's go clockwise. You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm Diggs. Normally you can find me in the forums, but the forums look a little different. I don't know what that's going to be like these days. Landmark Forum seems to be going kind of strong, so hopefully you'll find me there. You can find me on Twitter, and see what happens today.
Okay. Sorry, I'm back. Hey, I'm Steve Denuser, known as Morgard. I was at SOE/Daybreak until a little while ago. And now I'm just here to talk about games and hang out with cool people. So ask cool questions.
I don't know where he's finding those cool people, but since I'm next to him, hey, I'm Sog. I have opinions. I just want to bring up, I've been working pretty hard on our question logging system, so if you do have a question, just enter your question in as square brackets enclosing a Q or the word question before your question, and it'll show up on our currently under construction minus GeoCities under construction GIFs TheoryForge.tv website. I'm sorry that I don't have those GIFs. I lost them in 1996.
We'll add a little style if you found them again.
You guys are familiar with me, Velx from 10 Ton Hammer, just doing the normal writing thing, kind of doing the revival live cast we have going on Sunday as well, so you guys can tune in for that. But other than that, just writing, a lot of deep. I had 2 big deep columns this week, so if you guys didn't get to read those, I just posted one, so don't feel like you missed that one, but pretty interesting stuff, so check them out.
Awesome. Well, I'd like you guys to all follow us on Twitter and all of those wonderful things, since we do got a couple different shows. We've got one for Crowfall and one for Revival going on different days. So we're expanding out a little bit, as we talked about last week, from just the EQN and Landmark stuff. And everyone say hi to Griffin, my lovely kitty that kept me up last night.
Yeah, Griffin.
So, well, I think our first topic, which is actually an expansion on a topic that was suggested by a viewer, and we would really love y'all guys to send us some topics and things that you'd like to see us chat about. It'd be really cool. A lot of us here play some of the older MMOs like WoW and Guild Wars and EverQuest, or have had a lot of experience with them, and they're still going on. So we talk a lot about what's coming and what's new, what we like to see in these MMOs, but, what do y'all think that really works right now? Like, why are these games even still here when everyone says that, well, we hate it, or we don't like it, or it's boring, or whatever? Who wants to start us off here?
I'll jump in since I'm in the clockwise rotation. Everybody else will have to jump in. I think people like to raid. People who like repetitive stuff will keep playing. People who like the community will keep playing. I'm not playing them. I first wanted to play EverQuest so that I could EverQuest, and I'm still waiting to be able to EverQuest, not to have repetitive content. So that's what really drew me into the idea that I heard for EverQuest Next. Is I want to get rid of the end game and getting stuck with no content left for 8 months while we wait for new content. I'm not playing WoW. I'm not playing EverQuest. I played WildStar for 2 days. I played Project Gorgon for 1 day. I've played a lot of Landmark since Landmark's been out, but I won't play them. I don't like raiding, and I'll ditch the community if there's no story. So.
Yeah, that was kind of like some of the main themes of the stuff I was writing this week. It's really been on my mind, this whole, nature of former MMOs and how they started, or MMORPGs to be specific. Just really the way they started out, kind of. I was always a big fan of role-playing and MUDs and, getting to this immersive world that you were into and a part of, and you were interacting with people. And it seems so much today like a lot of these games have moved away from the interactive multiplayer elements, from having that as part of the narrative. It seems like they've been kind of separated lately, and you have this partitioned game system where people are, going into queues and stuff and instancing out to other things. So you got most MMOs today kind of feel like a glorified lobby to me personally. So to see the fact that a lot of them are still alive today is just, I think that it attests to the fans that were created early on as part of it. And I think that, the one thing that these games do offer is they offer a lot of different things to do. You've got these instance PvE raid type things. It's, very elaborate. It's a mini game, but it's a very elaborate mini game, and it's tied to a particular character that persists. And the same thing with PvP. It's kind of like this mini game arena that's tied to a particular character. So I feel like, these games still persist because they're offering some of that. But I think we're getting to the point where we're seeing that a lot of other games coming out, MOBAs for instance, for PvP, are really kind of superior in a lot of ways to combat you would experience in an MMO, especially PvP combat. So I think it's interesting, and I'm interested to see, what is coming with the future for, new cutting-edge MMO RPGs coming out, to see what they'll offer. And I'm also interested to hear what the others have to say here about this, because it's been bugging me this week, and I kind of want to know what everybody feels about the past, the present, and the future.
Sorry, we lost somebody in our Skype chat, and I'm readjusting all of the windows. So, Steve, that makes it your turn.
Okay, it's my turn. Well, it's interesting because I still play WoW, and I'm one of those that gets drawn back when a new expansion comes out. And I think this most recent one, Warlords, is particularly compelling. So in previous ones, I would kind of fall off after. So typically some old friends and stuff like that, or coworkers would get involved when the new expansion comes out, and then everybody grinds to max level, everybody raids for a little bit, and then typically people start falling away, and interest would dwindle. But in this most recent one, and I should also say that you're kind of left with either raiding or daily quests, and I hate daily quests. I just refuse to do them in pretty much any MMO. I refuse to do them in WoW.
I'm with you on that one.
But in Warlords, they did this insidiously clever thing, which is that daily quests are hidden behind your stronghold. So, I log in, and I'm in my nice little stronghold, and I have these NPCs that I've met and collected, and they're my buddies now. And, oh, hey, I should go into the mines and get some more ore and do some work orders, and, hey, I should do this, harvest my herbs and do all this stuff. And so I don't feel like I'm doing daily quests, even though I know I've been tricked into doing them. But it's still fun and cool. And they've done a nice job with giving you some new story bits. I think they continue to get better at telling stories, even though they're finite and you kind of play through them, and I don't feel compelled to play them again. But it's still, they've done some new kind of storytelling tricks with this expansion, and so I like that. And so I think if games can do that, if they can retain the appeal of what got them their core audience, but then try some new tricks with each new expansion, I think that they can do well, and I think Blizzard is really reaping the benefits of that right now.
What's getting you hooked on the rating part? Is the rating still kept up going with Draenor?
I
or,
actually I haven't raided in the new expansion at all. Actually, the last time I'd done it was the last one. Actually, I don't even know if I did Cataclysm raids. I did Wrath of Lich King raids, but that was it. And so raiding isn't as big a deal to me as it used to be. When I was playing EverQuest and EverQuest 2, I was a hardcore raider, and did that an awful lot. And then WoW to a much lesser extent. And lately I just don't have as big a desire to it, in part because a lot of my friends aren't playing it as regularly, so, I have to go out and find new people to group with, and raid with, and people.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I'm in the
I have
same
not
road
played
there.
this expansion of WoW at all. Partially because it was going to cost me a whole lot of money to transfer a character I had over to be able to play with friends who were starting up playing, and I felt like the cost gate getting in was, and I was susceptible to being brought back in. I couldn't get over the cost hurdle initially to be able to move I have a level 80 druid and a level 85 priest that I could have moved over, and I could have gone through the Pandaria stuff. I could have leveled up to 100 eventually. And I just never did it. I never jumped in, but like Dig said, I am not playing a game right now. I am not. I'm hoping to start playing Shroud of the Avatar tonight and give that a try. It looks pretty cool. Some of the fast travel mechanics look neat. The UO-esque world seems what Richard Gary had said. We'd call it Ultima Online if we were allowed to, or something like that.
Yeah, sure do.
But yeah, that's where I'm at.
The other thing I'm doing is I'm playing a lot of Destiny right now, and that's it's very different in terms of the DNA of an MMO. It's definitely there, but that's really the lobby. You come into the world and you're in a lobby, and there's not as many shared spaces, and going off into instances and stuff like that. But I really enjoy that game too.
I've been hooked a lot recently on H1Z1. Like, I streamed it a little bit when it first came out, and then I was busy with a lot of other stuff, but I've gotten in the last few days a little bit, a couple hours each day, and just I've really had fun with the crafting system. Like, even if you're on a PvE server, like, I find, like, you can have a lot of fun playing with the crafting, running around, and it's really an in-the-moment type game, which I like. It's not as, long-term focused. But other than that, I did get to dive into Skyforge a little bit early on. They're in their closed beta, and it wasn't what I was expecting from having like read the the website and everything and seeing kind of what they were pushing. So I don't see like a lot of the elements in there that are really dynamic yet, but I mean it's still early on, so we'll see. But it seems to me like a very kind of like your typical run-of-the-mill, it's just not, there's not too many unique features. That they have things like that Ascension Atlas, but I was kind of expecting or hoping, I guess, for that to be more, you can choose the way you're customizing your character and create some of that, creativity element to it, but it's really just like a straight line that you unlock, with no branches for a very long time. So I was kind of disappointed to see that aspect of it, but
it's funny. I notice things when developers are talking about their games, when they release a video with the devs talking about stuff, and pretty much every MMO team will talk about the character customizability and the ability to mix and match things and make your own thing. And the problem is that makes different things appear in the heads of different people hearing it, and it creates this wide range of expectations, and it's really hard to meet those. But everybody kind of says it the same way because they think about it through this lens of, we're going to offer all these different customization choices, and most of the time, by sheer necessity, a lot of those end up being false choices, and that they don't really make you unique or different. Or if they do, it's within a pretty narrow spectrum of stuff because they still have to balance the game and all that kind of thing. But everybody still gets their hopes up when they hear stuff like that. It's it's interesting.
The shocking bit about it was like I was expecting there to at least be some false choices, but there's like literally no. I mean, you get at least 2/3 of the way down the line before you even get your first actual kind of choice. It's really weird. I was expecting. I was expecting some more branching, even if it was like false, that you would kind of pick one path, at least give the illusion of choice, but they didn't even do that.
I played like, I think a total of 5 minutes of the first iteration of a playable, I think it was alpha at the time, and I couldn't, I don't know, I had like a whole weekend that I could play it, and just, it didn't catch me with I think it was just combat that was in it, but there was nothing like, no questing or anything that really story part of the game, but I don't know. It just, it didn't really hook me. I mean, I still play WoW, and I play a lot of raiding and a lot of, I'd say semi-hardcore. I mean, we're in a low population server, but we're, I think, 6 right now, and just killed Blackhand, which is pretty awesome, but I don't know, for me it's more the community, and it's something to fill time right now because nothing else has really hooked me. I mean, the Garrison, it's like your dailies turned into a glorified Facebook game, really. I mean, I sit there and literally wait for the timers on my Garrison. Oh, come on, kitty. Cat attack. So much fun.
What is it about WoW that makes people keep coming back? I know I read one of Locke's articles on Zam a while ago. He refers to Locke as like refers to WoW as the familiarity of it that we all play. Diggs maybe did not play. Did you play any World of Warcraft, Diggs?
Well, I worked at Activision, which is a gaming studio, so you have to play games because everybody in the office plays games. So yeah, Warcraft 2 was one of the first ones that was big when we were working on Mech 2. So World of Warcraft 2, and that's, I don't know, it's funny when EverQuest 2 was coming out, everybody at Activision wanted to play World of Warcraft instead. I was the only person interested in EverQuest 2. And that was because I was heavily into the lore for EverQuest and not so much into the lore for Warcraft. But World of Warcraft is a much easier game to play, so I liked playing that more than EverQuest 2, and then I liked the lore of World of Warcraft.
All right, you used easy as a positive here. We hear people saying all the times in forums like easy. Don't make our game easy. Don't do that. Don't make our game easy. It has to be hard, or people are gonna hate it. Like
I don't think people really know what they want. To be honest,
I think easy can be a good thing. But what specifically is easy that matters is like the ease of the transition from when I sit down to when I'm playing the game. Like, I want to be able to sit down and log in and feel like I'm playing right away. That's an ease of transition. I want an ease of communication. I want to feel like I can jump into what I want to be doing. And that go on.
One of the things when I say easy, and I mean kind of all around easy, not just gameplay, not just actual game mechanics, but when I was playing EverQuest 2. It would take me 3 minutes to log into a zone. So I would load and get up and get something to eat and come back and I didn't have to do that with WoW. So I just liked playing the game more because everything about it, I could just play and not worry about it.
So I would riff off that a little bit because I think, the familiarity gets mentioned a lot. But I think you hit on something important in that when you play WoW, everything just works. Like, it's really smooth, the performance is good, there's not bugs in your face. the interface works the way you would expect it to most of the time. They spend a lot of thought and energy on the experience, the user experience of logging in, getting into game, and then having stuff on your screen just kind of make sense for you and be relatively bug-free. And people discount that because when you're doing it, you don't think of that. Like, oh, this was a very bug-free experience. There's just nothing that gets in the way of getting to the fun. Whereas, that was I don't want to rag on SOE and my former colleagues, but, that was a thing that was always a problem there, is that we didn't have that same kind of luxury time that Blizzard has to perfect what they do. Things were, always under a lot of pressure, and so there wasn't just that cohesive eye usually of looking and making sure the experience itself was as smooth as it possibly could be, and so there's just not a lot of games that enjoy that. I think WildStar actually did a really good job of clearing away impediments as well. I don't think that was their problem in terms of retaining players, because in terms of launching, they had one of the smoothest and most bug-free kind of experiences of getting into game that I've experienced. It's just other things that got in the way of the enjoyment there, personally.
With
Yeah,
WildStar, you listed close to the top. Is it your number one game launch? I think Rift had a fantastic game launch. And that's the one that I would rate. I went from being a beta tester to logging in day one and feeling like I was really playing the game. And that was a fantastic start.
For a long time, I've always felt like, Blizzard and World of Warcraft, it was this perfect storm of events. There was so many things playing into why it was successful, but one of the ones that I've always mentioned is the fact that they have this established IP with their RTS. And what you guys were just saying kind of makes me kind of wonder, did their experience in creating RTS games, the core mechanic of those games is efficiency for the most part. To win those games, you got to be efficient with your resources and all these things. So they streamline everything to make sure that everything is easy and efficient and quicker. If a lot of that played into their design elements for World of Warcraft, if it helped them really streamline their game and make sure there's nothing getting in the player's way, because I feel like that would be a natural explanation for that.
I think one of the key things was that they had time, because I was at E3 5 times in a row. We'd be asking to see more stuff, and it would be like, when it's ready, it will release when it's ready. And man, that's one of the first games that I feel like took at least 5 years and actually release something that was good. But at the time, everybody else seemed to be, 3 years was your window. 5 years seemed outrageous, to be at E3 5 times and not have released anything. So some of it was just that they were given the time.
Yeah, I mentioned, I described the time that they had as a luxury, and it is true. Few studios are in the position where they can say, no, we'll put it out when it's ready. But it's not just about that. It's about that they, as a development culture, have a commitment to quality, and they're just not going to release something unless it's good. And their success allows them to be able to do that to an extent. But I think that regardless of whether you're a huge studio or a small one, if you have that commitment to quality and only releasing things that are good, you can rein in your scope, and you don't have to be this big giant game that has all the features. But if you have that commitment to quality, your game will shine, and people will stick around and stick with it and give you the time necessary to build upon that and expand upon that.
And I really loved their storytelling. It's when I jumped into WoW that I really felt like I was doing things for my class. I was playing a druid, and I got to go in, and these gazelles or zebras or something had some disease, and I could go in, and at the end of the quest, they were all disease-free, and I was like, oh, look! I changed the world. And I think that's one of the key differences to me too. Is that even on the beginning, it wasn't as immersive, I'll say, as it was for Cataclysm. Even just going into vanilla WoW, there were moments where I felt like I was impacting the world, even for a few minutes.
It's something they've done really well when you take into account that they don't have emergent AI or emergent, like what we've talked about with story bricks, where the things you do change the storyline as a whole. I mean, they don't have that, and they probably can't implement that with this game because they'd have to redo the whole thing. But it's something they've done well with things like, and I'm blanking on what it's called. Yeah, the phasing, where you do something and then you've done this one thing, you get a cutscene, you get this, that, and the other, and then all of a sudden the world around you's changed, which is nice, though occasionally is annoying as well, because then you can't play with someone else if they haven't done that part of the quest line or scenarios or whatever. But I mean, they are good storytellers for a game.
Yeah, Diggs, you brought up a really interesting thing. Like when you were saying, you were playing as a druid and you felt like what you were doing and achieving in the game, related to your class. That's something that I was like kind of thinking a lot about this week. Really contextual, context-based actions. Even if you're not I always get, like that people not everybody relates to like a hardcore role player, and not everybody is a hardcore role player, but I feel like a lot of developers and studios have kind of like backed off of like kind of requiring some contextual choice making with their, with the players, where when you're playing a class, you're going to make choices or do things that are really, contextual to what class you're playing and what you are. I feel like there's so much interchangeability now that like players don't actually act as their character would in game. They just kind of take the path to whatever achievement they're seeking, whatever path that is, whether it matters how, what their character is. Like a paladin, for example, like killing a bunch of neutral animals, with no regret whatsoever, because hey, he's a paladin and he wants the next big like hammer, the next piece of loot. Whereas if you added different mechanics to where that paladin has to get to his place, through context-based actions, I feel like that would help with immersion so much. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, I haven't like played many games recently that have had those strong elements of contextual action. It just seems like, so open-ended that you play any class and you do anything, and there's no real meaning to your class other than what your abilities are.
Do you think
none of them felt like that?
But like, if we're talking about like games that we would stick to and games we have played for a long time, is that something that was a key to those games? Like, is having that kind of hook and connection like that? For me, it was. It has been. To explain, I have somewhere between 300 and 400 days played in IKEA, and about 20 days played in WoW. But when I think about IKEA, I think of it in terms of I was a dwarven paladin, not like I was a raider, or I was a healer, or I was a tank at different points in my, maybe more than 20 days in WoW, but it's I probably do, but I haven't checked for a long time.
I'm sorry, did you say you once spent 300 days in an IKEA store? Is that what you said?
No.
That is sick. That is an illness, man.
I'm sure there are people that
How
have,
many meatballs did you eat?
I don't know. If people haven't played IKEA, it's not spelled like IKEA, but if you haven't, you should probably check it out. For me, it's that, like, you can never go home thing. You ever had that feel? Like, WoW is the place that you go home to. Like, you have no game to play, and so you go home, you go back and you go play WoW for a little while. You don't have anything new. For me, every time I want to go back and play IKEA, I can never be who I was before, because I'm not at that place in the social structure of the game anymore. So I log back in and I'm just some guy nobody knows, and I'm basically a noob. and it feels to, and I feel like I'm home, but nobody at home recognizes me, and I can't play the game anymore.
Like you've gone back for your 20th high school reunion, and everybody's different, and they're all in different places, and the bars have different names, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that it's that kind of feeling, and and it was because I was so deeply that character. Like, I go back and people recognize my character from 10 years ago, that when I log into the game, people notice that I've logged into the game, but there are other people doing all of the things that I used to do, so I can't really jump back into the role, and I can't be the character. I have to play. I have to RP basically some old decrepit, I'm going to tell you stories from 10 years ago guy. There's really nothing else I can do.
No, to answer your question, though, I do feel that way. Like, the games that I played a lot, and that still, like, just last year I played EverQuest with my guild for, like, we just picked it back up. We're like, you know what, we're all going to start new characters and do the EverQuest thing all over again. And we played for, like, a good 2 months, like, twice a week. We all got together, and it was a lot of fun. And even though that game has changed so much, like, I still felt like when I played a rogue in EverQuest, like, you were a rogue, like, your actions, the actions you took, you played like a rogue. It wasn't just, I have a few abilities. Like, you had to actually, almost everything you do, you had to do based on, your abilities and your tool set, your kit that you would do. And it just doesn't feel like a lot of games have that. And to me, that's an important thing. Like, that's the draw I get for games. That's why I haven't really latched onto a game necessarily, except maybe, H1Z1 as an example. Like, you do feel like a survivor in that game who is, like, fighting for your life. Like, you feel the role that you're in, and to me that's important. Like, I like that type of immersion where whatever you're trying to be in the game or whatever you're playing as, it feels like that's what you're doing and that's what you are. So, and the world, how you affect the world around you and how people perceive you in the game is based on that, who you are in the game. I really love that, and I feel like it's just not something a lot of games out there have today.
This is definitely missing from a lot of the games that have recently launched. I mean, I tried playing Arcade, I tried playing WildStar, I've played a little bit of the SkyForge, I've tried to play all of these different ones, and there's just, I can't hook myself. The only one that I did get into was Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. But Final Fantasy is a lot like WoW and EverQuest, where it's got this entire world that's already been built. So no matter what you do in that world, you feel like you're kind of a part of that world, and there's so much context to it because you already know all of it. A lot of us who are playing had played, Final Fantasy 1 through 12, 13, all of them, and we all know what a chocobo is, we all know what all these things about the world, and it just, that's how WoW feels as well. But when you, like, WildStar and Arcade, they were hard to play because they felt like a little bit like cookie cutter MMOs, but without a context for me, or without a nostalgia aspect to it.
No established IP that you're familiar with?
Well, it's not even that the IP necessarily, it's just not really a connection to a world, which is not something that I really thought I cared about all that much, but there is a little bit to it, I think.
My favorite MMO, and the one where I felt most like captured my class, is KOA Reckoning. The only problem with that MMO is that it was single player.
You keep bringing up Reckoning. I have to keep sending you money for the plugs, Diggs. I mean, this is getting expensive.
I'm serious.
Not a working man here.
That is my
I need
favorite
to start
MMO.
a donation channel just so that I can pay you for these plugs.
And it was not because, again, it had me doing things that I would not normally do. It would push me to go and pickpocket people. It would push me to slaughter people while they're sleeping. Sometimes you get caught pickpocketing and you'd be sent to jail, and you got to figure out how to get out of jail. So it had all of these. There was one woman who was like standing out in the street, and I'd see her. I finally found her dead husband or something, and they were like, take it to this woman and, give it to her. And I went back to find her, and she wasn't there anymore, so I had to figure out where she went. So that world gave me so much context and was pushing me in all these different directions that did not feel like linear gameplay. It kind of felt almost like emergent AI. And that's the kind of world that you want to be in, that's really making you feel like you live in the world. Again, that what you do is having an impact on the world. And that the NPCs care about what you do. The people in the game care that you're having an impact. And that's what I'd love to see more of, and those are the kinds of stories that I would love to see continue instead of hitting an end game and being stuck for a year and a half waiting for new content.
I'd like to have a game that has intelligent NPCs that know how to help you.
Well, what does that mean?
Ever try to play with the NPCs in WoW? It's like playing with the bottom of the barrel LFR kids that are literally like hitting their face against a keyboard.
My favorite part of the quest where you have the NPCs that run faster than you can walk, but run way slower than you can run. That's like the most ridiculous.
They've fixed that for the most part. They don't do those as badly as they used to do that anymore, I think. But it's interesting that I think making you feel like part of your class is an important thing. And when I played EverQuest, I played a monk, and I was really into the whole Ashen Order thing. And I really felt like I was helping my house, and that I was, I would play in game according to tenets that I thought the Ashen Order wanted me to do. But, it's interesting because when you really look at it, there was very little, there were those initial quests to get your, your sashes and stuff. But there wasn't a lot to go on. And I think part of the strength of that is that it caused me to fill in the blanks for myself. And so I had this vision of the Ashen Order that probably wasn't what the designers had wanted me to have, and it probably was in some ways and not in others. But it didn't matter because I was able to craft the kind of experience that I wanted to as I was doing those quests and going out into the world and finding the stray monk, here and there, kind of a thing. And that was very powerful, and it caused me to have a deep connection to that. And it was almost an accidental thing. I don't know that they really, I know that they didn't intend for that to happen in exactly the way that it did. And what you get in a lot of games is that because there's better tools for storytelling, there's more elaborate dialogue systems and quest systems and things like that. Now you encountered this generation of designers who said, well, I can do better than that. I can make these very specific stories that tell these very deep, meaningful tales. And the tales were deep and meaningful to them because they came up with them, but they didn't necessarily translate to the players as being as deep and meaningful because it wasn't the stories they made like we did back in the early EverQuest days. And I think that's the promise of sandbox games, sandbox MMOs, is that they should give you the freedom to fill in the blanks more, like EverQuest did, and thereby develop your own ties into the world. And it's okay if your view of this faction that you fight for is slightly different from another player's, because you've made your personal connection, and that's what's really going to keep you in that game. And the more, it's one of the things that from that next generation of MMOs that came along, those very specific quest lines, those very specific dialogue trees, it didn't leave room for the characters to breathe. And I think that ultimately worked to their detriment a little bit.
It kind of reminds me of this, issue you get into with books and movies. Everybody always loves the book more than the movies because the movie just puts it out for you. It's got its specific message, whereas when you read a book, it does have a specific message, but there's plenty of room for you to imagine how things look the way you want, for you to, there's a lot more of that fill in the blanks, and you get to attach more to the story, more to the characters, because it's not something so clearly defined that when you see it, you're like, okay, that actually, that doesn't relate to me as much as a more ambiguous element could, because you could start applying things that resonate with you to that, where they fit. So
Some of the nostalgia for me going back to games is not just the history, but also the locations. I mean, WoW has some beautiful locations, and there are places in EQ2 especially that I like traveling back to. It's funny, I think somehow I translated the look of EQ to EQ2 or something, because when I went back to see Tobrin and Locke playing P1999, I was like, that looks like Doom. I, I thought I was in this nice, smooth world, and I'm like, no, that's not the EQ as I remember it. But especially EQ2, and well, WoW, and then some places in EQ2, you just travel to some locations, and I feel like I'm going on a vacation. And it's the fun of feeling like I know this world, I know where I want to go, and I just want to experience what life is like in this place. So that kind of nostalgia and that kind of connection to location is also kind of cool once you dive into the lore.
For when you log into a game for the first time, what kinds of things for you would say, look, I feel like this character, or look, I'm hooked? Because we're saying that what's going to make us play a game longer, the general theme here is that we feel like we have a connection to the world, or a connection to the character, or we fit into the social structure within the game. From a real quick upfront, what do you guys prefer? New player experience is one of the hardest things for any developer to tackle, from my perspective. Like when I'm looking at what people are doing with games, and I see the best and the worst, and it seems like it's really, really hard. What about it? Like, what makes you feel like a druid in WoW, or a warrior? You have a little bit of your storyline. You have there's something special that happens there when you create your character and as you go in. And I don't mind saying what I think is terrible. When I think it's terrible. In Arcade, when you make a character, you go through the same little thing. You make your character and you go through the same exact storyline with each different one every time. Some of the aspects early on are kind of cool. In WildStar, you're trying to scour through Twitter to figure out which tweets matter, and it works to an extent. But what does it right? I always talk about loving Age of Conan and feeling like if you do at least the newbie area of Age of Conan is the best part of that game. I love it. I would play that over and over again for every class, and I would leave the newbie area feeling like now I'm an adult. Like now I'm a real person. Now I'm ready to take on the world as this character in this class, and I feel invested. And they did such a great job of that. But I don't know what they did to stand out like that.
So for me, so on the Bartle score, I'm an explorer first, like 85% or something like that, explorer. So pretty much and that probably comes from playing AD&D. I was the rogue that would go out and map out the dungeon for the rest of the group. So that concept of stealth and exploration is key for me. When I was playing EQ, what made me feel like a druid was getting Spirit of the Wolf, being able to cast that on myself, being able to cast that on other players, and I did not feel like I was a druid until I got Sal. And once I got Sal, it could help other people move through the world. That's when I would feel like a druid. So And the two driving forces for that for me were movement for myself, stealth for myself, and being able to heal other people in the game. And I love it a lot better when I can heal people outside of the group. I don't have to be inside of the group to affect other people in the game.
I like that too.
And for WoW, cat form was important. So my main character in WoW was actually a cat that had a Tauren transformation form. And part of that for me meant that most of the time I would not use fast travel unless it was part of a quest, because I'm a cat and you can't ride on a wyvern or whatever those things, Batwing as a cat. But if I'm a druid in WoW, cat form is the most important thing that makes me start to be like, I've reached druid.
I feel like hearing you guys talk and thinking about my own experiences of like the early starting an experience or when you really feel that attachment, like to me feels like it comes down to perception. You know, like once the minute you've done enough to where you're like, okay, I see how this works. I kind of see how I need to be in this world or how I need to use this particular class or whatever. And that's one form of it. Once you finally understand your place and your role and how you fit in. But the other big one I think is once, or at least to me, this one's for me from the games I've played. Once the other people around me perceive me as what I am. Like once they see, oh, that he's a rogue, and when they engage you, they're like, oh, we need help. Like somebody got their corpse stuck. Can you drag it out? Like these really important mechanics that existed in the game that maybe at first were not necessarily intentionally designed to be so influential, but for whatever reason, the wizard porting, the druid sows, the rogues corpse pulling, like these things became just this crucial, draw, and it created a perception where people view you all of a sudden not just as some generic other player that looks a certain way, but as that core role. That's how you're perceived, and that to me that's a big thing. And I think the earlier they can do that in the new player experience, the better, because I think that's where you finally really start getting the major hook.
Well, I think it's interesting because I believe that there's it depends on the person a little bit. So I mentioned I played a monk in EQ, and I like playing monks, and usually if I play an MMO and it has a monk, I'm going to be the monk every time. And not all MMOs have that. But so there's a difference, I think, in the people who gravitate towards a class or a character for kind of their look and their demeanor in game versus players who do it for mechanics. So, an MMO doesn't usually need to have a monk class because usually they're like a flavor of warrior and maybe they're parts rogue and part warrior or some combination thereof. But strictly speaking, you wouldn't need to have those. But they're an interesting class to have in a game because they appeal to a certain type of person, someone who likes martial arts or someone who likes that style of how they fight and things like that. So you may not gain a lot from a mechanics standpoint having a monk in game, but you'll gain something from players who gravitate towards that style or that that kind of aura that the class has. And bards are the same way. There's a lot of people who just love playing bards because of the fact that they're these characters who run around and sing songs or play instruments in addition to all the other stuff they do. But those mechanics are often secondary. Whereas there's another type of player who is like, look, I'm going to be the person who holds aggro best. So I don't care what class it is. Give me a character and show me in character create which one is going to be the best tank, and I will be that because that's what I am in my guild. And there's players who are like, I don't care what healing class I play. Just point me to the best, instant cast healer, the best return on investment for my mana, and I will play that class, whatever it is. So as long as you satisfy those kinds of players with the mechanics that they need to feel like the role that they enjoy in the game, then they will feel that connection and they'll start that way. But it really depends on the player and what they personally feel is important. And whether it's that style and that the animations that the class has and the types of weapons it uses, or is it strictly come down to mechanics?
It's combat role and character role. I mean, those are the things that I think of. That I think that devs need to be thinking about both of those things, or I hope that devs are thinking about not only combat role, which lots of gamers are really, computer gamers are really into the combat role. But
I think it's
character
about
role
social role, and both play into that. So when you, in World of Warcraft, where you fit into the social structure has a lot to do with how well you perform the function of the role that you advertise yourself as filling, right? If you click the green plus, you better be a really good healer, and like how the community interacts with you has to do with how well you fill that role and how well you click buttons. But it doesn't have to be all of that. It's about what that gets you. And if there are other ways to get you to that point, and there are ways to create a broader tree, we're seeing more and more games as they're being developed talking about give a whole lot of love to crafting classes as being like, this is, I know it's one of those things, like you say it and it gets a whole bunch of people excited, and you create all kinds of expectations you can never really live up to, but it's this idea of, wait, I have another way that I can fit into society that isn't tank, damage, healer. And the mechanics of the game create possible ways in which you can fit into society. Like, if your idea of being a jester is not supported and you just type emotes in chat all day, you'll get a small reputation in that one, people that pass through that one town on your server and maybe on the forums, but you'll never really be something in the game if that's not supported as doing something and showing that you can advance in it in some way.
So I was going to say, I mean, this is a fascinating point that you brought up. Because one of the things I was thinking about before you started speaking was what's going to happen as we become known for our out-of-game personalities, and we're moving from game to game to game, and how do we fit into the various games, just our space in society, because in the social structure, because we are who we are in the forums, or we are who we are when we stream. But when I played Wizard 101, I was Charles Darwin of pet breeding. I was the one who figured out how I coined the term pet gnome, which is like genome, and you could figure out what your children would be based on what the parents would have. And that was my social place. I was Charles Darwin of pet breeding. But also, because of that, one of the top PvP players wanted to play with me just because they liked who I was on Facebook and on Twitter. And we would Skype all the time. They wanted to know how they could breed the best pets so that they could use those pets during PvP. So they would power level me. And I learned how to play based on playing with these high-profile PvPers. So it didn't matter what class I played. I understood the mechanics of, and this is a card game, so I understood the mechanics of which card would best enhance other people's cards. That social structure, people would start asking me to play with them because I understood, no matter what class or what character I was playing, how best I could help them in combat. So it doesn't necessarily have to be class, but you do have to figure out what your place in the social structure would be, but that doesn't necessarily have to be class-based or combat-based, I think, depending on the game.
Well, yeah, it's interesting when the human factor comes in, because again, in EQ, I picked a monk just because I thought it was cool. And I played the warrior first, because my first character was a warrior, and I thought it was boring. So I thought I'd try a monk, and I liked the flavor of it, so I stuck with it. And it wasn't until much later in the game that the emergence of the monk as the puller for your raid came about. And but I embraced that. I became a raider, and I embraced it. And there was this guy I played on the Povar server, and there was this wonderful guy who was a high-level monk named Sploss. And I got to know I met him when I was like level 10 or something in North Freeport. This monk in all this nice armor runs up to me and hands me a black pearl, and I thought like heaven had fallen from the sky. I was like, "Wow, black pearl! I'm losing my mind. This is great." And then many levels later, he connected with me and is like, "I'm going to teach you how to pull Plane of Fear because you need to know how to do this." I'm like, "What?" And so he taught me how to do this, and then I became a really good puller, and I became a puller for my guild, and it was a skill that I had that was very specific to EverQuest, obviously. And even though other games, EverQuest 2 had monks, but they didn't work quite the same way. The whole mechanics didn't work quite the same way, and so the skill didn't translate exactly over from game to game. And I think that might be one of the things that keeps people in certain games for a while, is they master something about the game that's not easy to figure out, and they feel very empowered by this. Mm-hmm. And so they, whether it's this game has a really complex interface, and I have figured out how to play it, and I can do this thing, or whether it's I can figure out the timing of mobs when I pull them, or I can figure out how to breed pets, or whatever that is. You have some mastery that is linked to you as a person that makes you unique or special or of an elite class in that game. And you're not going to get that if you move over to another game that has completely different mechanics. So it keeps you in that world longer than it otherwise might, because you like that. We all like to feel special. We all like to feel like we're good at something. And so by staying in that game, you get to keep that feeling longer.
That ties into community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You become known now.
Yeah, the thing that I like, that I remember from games that I played for a long time is having alternatives to combat. Like, as much as I like combat in a lot of games, I love the different things you can do outside of combat. As a rogue, I liked doing corpse running was one of my favorite things for people. I loved the non-combat elements, exploring. Half the time, one thing I really loved would be like taking my rogue and going places I'm not supposed to go, in zones I'm not supposed to go, to just kind of find out where I can go, what I can see and stuff, and that was always cool. And I like to see new games kind of pursuing this, because I feel like new MMOs, they have such a short window where people, hang around and they either like it or they don't. I feel like, new MMOs really need to pursue these alternatives to combat, so that, because I feel like if there's anything that'll give you an attachment, it'll be not just like a skill that you can master in combat, but a wide range of things that you can just gravitate towards, that you enjoy, that actually have some in-game value, mechanically, to benefit the people around you, so they're actually built into the game. And, Sog has mentioned, and we've talked about, like, crafting, how some games out there are saying, hey, we're going to make crafting a real thing, and not, do they all come out with it? Not necessarily, but that's one thing that I see, and I feel like crafting and combat are just, like, a quarter of the pie or something. I feel like there's more to it that, is directly related to combat, between, trade and diplomacy. I think that, those four things can all be their own little quarters of the gameplay in MMOs that we know and we're familiar with today, without adding in a bunch of extra stuff. I feel like, if you created systems unique to those that could be 1/4 of the progression pie, I really feel like those would get a lot of, love and attention, and fit well in a lot of MMOs, even that exist today,
Well, yeah, like Vanguard was a good example. They spent a lot of effort on making diplomacy as its own system, and crafting as its own system, and had the potential to do stuff like that. But man, the problem is, those are all really good ideas when you're brainstorming them and you're envisioning what the game is going to be. And then when it comes time to actually make that, you realize that you've just tripled the amount of content that you have to make for this game. And most of the time, projects just run out of time. On EverQuest 2, when we were going to launch that game, we talked about how we wanted crafting to be its own classes, all this stuff. You could just be a crafter and progress that way. And but it just ran out of time to make the content for it, and had to scope that back and say, well, you can be this in addition to this, and it just gets really hard, and it's one of those things where when you're in the trenches of development, a lot of times you have to make those hard choices and say, man, we wish we could do this thing and support it the way that we had hoped to, and we just can't. We're just not going to have the time, we're not going to have the money, whatever, the resources to do it. That's tough choices.
And Vanguard was one of the saddest, most promising situations like that. That just, what we did was we all played WoW. We ran out of. There's nothing to do in Vanguard. It was like all of this potential in a bottle that just wasn't done, and then we all played WoW.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, it's going to take new technology for ways to create continuous content. Systems that provide continuous content where there's not so much onus on the developers to create so much. And I think another thing too is that, I feel like a lot of developers making MMOs, for whatever reason, feel like, to cater to the MMO audience currently, that they need to provide all the same features that other MMOs have. Like, they need to have, X number, X, Y, and Z when it pertains to combat, because all MMOs have this. Whereas I feel like so much can be, I feel like the amount of combat stuff can be cut back to increase the amount of stuff you could, create content and other things. And the whole ecology of the game would be, make that game actually innovatively different and unique. Which, is another big thing that I think players, when they get into any new game coming out, it's not necessarily that they're like, hey, this game reminds me of this, and I'm going to play it because it's like this game. Most people look at a new game because they're like, this is a new experience. What is this game going to be? Is it going to be different? Is it going to be, they want to consume something different. And I think because so many games are kind of coming out with this templated, well, we want to have X number of classes, or we use the Holy Trinity, or we do these different things. And I think a lot of those things aren't even necessary. I feel like a lot of developers, because of the huge cost of making these games, feel like, if they don't do something safe or trusted, that they, run the risk of not even attracting this audience that have had these things forever, high-end rating and all that stuff. I feel like games can do really well. I mean, you look at H1Z1 on Twitch, that is like a highly played game. A lot of people are really into it, and it's still in early access. And it doesn't, it's slated and talked about as an MMO, but it doesn't offer any of the traditional MMO stuff. And I think it's doing well because it is unique. And I don't know.
It's an MMO survival game, not an MMO RPG.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the strengths of that game is that, again, it lets you fill in the blanks a lot in your mind as to what your character is, what your backstory is, what's going on in the world, and things like that. That can actually be a strength for them. So I hope that they don't feel compelled to fill in those blanks for the players, but just leave it, in broad strokes. Because that can be a very powerful thing. I think, less is more is a lesson that MMO developers could benefit from, because there's the temptation is to, man, we have to match WoW feature for feature, or we have to come out with just as much content as an EverQuest that's been around 15 years. And you don't if you do it at a high level of quality, and what's there is strong enough that it's going to pull people back when you offer more of it. Again, I think Destiny is a pretty good example of this. They only have 3 classes. You branch each one, but it's 3 classes. It's not a lot of races, but those have really solid mechanics and a lot of differentiation. How you the character that you've chosen to play, and that's really strong. And I think it lures people back when you do that.
Well, when I think of what I want more of, because I do want more in general from most MMORPGs, one of the things that I loved about D&D 3.0 was the larger range of skills. I loved having diplomacy, bluff, and intimidation, where I could diplomacy my way out of combat, so I didn't have to do combat all of the time. Professions. one of my favorite professions is alchemy and reckoning. Going through and discovering, you have to discover the recipes by experimentation, kind of, for the whatever you got from the different potions. And sometimes you would just get this crazy stuff, and it would do crazy stuff to you if you tried it out. Shrink you, or I can't even remember all the stuff that it did to you, but it wouldn't always give you what you were looking for. When I think about Revival, one of the things that's drawing me to that game is the idea of being a scholar or an astrologer, or the difference. What's the difference between an elder god's ritual circle and a greater god's ritual circle? I can make those decisions, and it's not necessarily combat related. So that's the more that I would love RPGs to have more of, is stuff that's not just combat.
Awesome. Well, guys, it is about time to start doing some questions, and actually this is what we're talking about right now, kind of goes right into the first question we have, which was from Zach, about if there's any particular feature or hook to a game that keeps us coming back, which has been kind of been our general theme tonight. But for me, I just need a lot of things to randomly do and people to be around. Really, that's what keeps me coming back to WoW.
Name 3 random things that you like to do.
3 random things. I like to raid. It's not really random, but I like to raid because I like the people. To be completely honest, I sit in my garrison and stare at my mission board while listening to the Darkmoon Fair theme for hours at a time. For absolutely no reason.
What happens on the mission board? Just stare at
the mission board is basically the daily quest thing that we were talking about before, which is just, you send your followers out, they go do things, and you get different rewards for it. It's a mini game.
And it's surprising how compelling that is too. Like,
it's addictive. You have to do it.
So in Star Wars: The Old Republic, you could send your followers out on to do like little, missions and things like that, to bring crafting materials and stuff like that. And I never thought to do it as often as I probably should have, because it just wasn't that cool or engaging. But like in WoW, you send your followers out, and when they come back, there's an animation of them and the monster that they fought, and you see like a victory thing, and your little treasure chest for your reward kind of rumbles, and you get to click on it. And again, that's just a really nice job of selling this to you and making it exciting to have your followers come back and, whoa, did I succeed? And that kind of a thing. It's just those nice little touches that add that extra layer of fun and getting you to come back again.
So Diggs, what's your one or two things that hooks you to a game?
So I'm trying to think, because usually I would jump back and forth between WoW and EQ2. And I think both of it was, going back to both of them was just wanting to jump back into the lore of the world, the exploration, see if I could get to a new place. But it was mostly the nostalgia of knowing what that world would be, and just going back to the world and seeing what had changed. So more, again, like a few people have been saying in chat, kind of like reading a good book. Those are the trilogies or tetralogies that I would, go back to whenever there's a new book in the series, and if there's a new expansion in the series. That used to bring me back, but after Cataclysm, it's not drawing me back anymore.
I think Morgard, you're next for that one. We're just gonna go.
Yeah, I think it's for me. It's the character. Can I make an immediate connection to a character? Do I have is the style appealing to me? To be honest, I wasn't attached to WoW for a long time because I couldn't make a monk, and the humans were derpy looking. And so, like, I just didn't. There wasn't anything that got me hooked into the game. And what I ultimately ended up doing was saying, okay, I can't make a character I think looks cool. I'm going to make one that looks grotesque, and I'll just force myself to embrace it. So I made an undead dude and an undead warrior, and I ended up like developing feelings for him because, even though he was this hideous guy, I could kind of fill in some details in my mind about why he got the way that he did and all this kind of stuff. So it ended up working. It just took a lot longer for me to get a connection. But I'll always give MMOs a stronger chance if I can make a character that's appealing to me in some way, either because it looks cool and I think the style is executed well, and if I can find a class that I identify with. And like the Old Republic and Final Fantasy XIV both did well at that because I could play characters right out of the box that I liked immediately. And so I was willing to go farther in the storylines with them just because I had that immediate bond.
Well, since I'm next, for me, I want there to be a way that I can stand out as an individual in the world. I want to have a path. I don't like this feeling of being one of a million people. I like to, in WoW, I was talking in chat. I was a boomkin before there was even leather gear with magic power, because the healing power and magic power were separate. Because I liked that idea of being that something different and something special that had that like different thing that I could add to the world. If I can't be anything other than just one of a million, or even then I'm not that interested. I want to know how I can specialize and how I can be known about something. And
You're part of the problem, man. You're part of the problem. You get all these, MMOs get criticism because, you keep telling the story where you're setting people up to be the shining star and the hero of this world. And
I think you're misunderstanding there.
Heroes. But you see, everybody wants to be the unique and special thing, and it's hard to back that up without it feeling kind of trite and stuff. Unless you do it purely through, like we were talking about earlier, where my skills allow me to be a good monk, or Dig's skills end up as a person allow him to be a great pet trainer.
That's what I'm saying. That I want a system that allows me to be able to do something to stand out. No, I would rather, instead of the story telling me that I stand out, that does nothing for me. You've been chosen to be the hero of our world? I've been playing this game for 8 minutes. What the hell are you talking about, man? That doesn't get me. But my way of interacting with the world, just being able to find my own place, it isn't even necessarily being the best at something, although that feels really good. I do like being the best at things. I think people do. It's about finding a role, finding a place. Like, who am I in this world? That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm the leader of the world or I'm the superhero of the world, but I'm that guy that does this. That's what I want. And it's really hard to create a system that allows that, but I've played games where I felt like I could be that.
See, I'm torn with...
Well, before you go on, I'm going to go on a tangent because I saw Babylon 5 referenced in the chat logs, and so what you just said makes me think of one of my favorite Babylon 5 episodes. Was this one called "Comes the Inquisitor," and the premise of it is that there's these Vorlons are this kind of ancient race that is all wise, and they're going to help the younger races in this war against the Shadows. And two of the main heroes are Captain Sheridan, who runs the station, and Delenn, who's like the head of the Minbari, who are this elf-like wise race. But they need to be tested. So the Vorlon bring this Inquisitor, who's going to test Delenn and Sheridan and make sure they're worthy of the role that they have. And so there's the whole episode is about them. This guy who's this with this human with an English accent. He's just drilling them about being a hero and like, so you think you're so special, like you're the only one who can do this, do you? And he just keeps going after them. And what he's trying to do is break them down to the point where they say, no, I'm not special. I don't need attention, and I don't need to be the one that gets fame for doing this. If you can be the true hero, is the one who does what needs to be done alone in the dark where no one can see them, no one will ever remember their name, but what they did was important and crucial to saving the universe. And that's a total aside, but it makes me think, for all the people who want to be like, I'm the best PvPer on my server, I'm the guy who got the world first kill on this boss, like whatever it is, there's what the game is really made up of is all those people who do stuff quietly, who never gain fame, but they're the ones who make the world work and who make the world run and keep it going for all these years and years after its release.
And so to continue with that, like how I think the idea of making sure that you need all of these people to keep the world running is really where I'm coming from. That I feel like in a lot of games you don't need anybody to keep the world running. The world's just there. If 8 people log in to do the one 8-man raid, their 8-man dungeon there is, the world's still there. There isn't anything going on to keep the world running. If the world needs to be run, there are people who become a part of the running and become known for their part in that. And I think that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's part of the promise, I think, of some of the emergent content stuff, is that, look, you can be the one who goes to the epic world-changing event that's going on, and there's some boss, and we have to band together and fight him, or you can be the person who, you and your buddies just hang out in this one zone, kind of off to the side, where most people don't go, but by God, every week, every day, you're going to get in there, and you're going to save this village that the orcs keep threatening. And that's my job in that world. And nobody's ever going to write a book about my character. Nobody's ever going to do. But if I'm not there, that village is going to get overrun, man. And I'm not going to let that happen. And that gives you your own little story and your own little context in the world. And if emergent content can pull that off, that's going to be a very powerful thing that does set it apart from this current generation of games that make you feel like whether you're there or not doesn't really matter.
But it's not that people won't write the book about you, but every single person who thinks about their memoirs and stopped by adds you in on that one line. That's what it's about. I went to that village and I saw Morgard defending the same village from the orcs, and everyone's memoir has that one line. And they're like, wow, that...
Or if the NPCs there can remember you and they're talking about Morgard, that's cool too. But yeah, it's this impact again that's, for me, is what's driving me to EQ Next and to Revival, is how we're going to be impacting those worlds and how the NPCs are going to be reacting to what we're doing, hopefully.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat everything everybody has already said, but each one of you guys said a thing that really is the one, two quick things that I want to have in every game, and it's why I'm attracted to EQ Next and Revival. I feel like both of these games, the emergent AI plans they have, but Revival kind of even more so for its plans of having this, combat just being 1/4 of the pie. I feel like for the first thing, character creation has to be really good, because I have to like my character. I have to have some way to like them. Just like Morgard was saying, even if I have to make this grotesque thing to attach a story to somebody, I have to be able to make a character that I can feel has a believable story that would be enjoyable for me to play. But that aside, being able to create an identity in the world, or find a place in the complex ecology of the world, and the more complex it is, could be better. It just depends. As long as the game works fine with the complex ecology, I would prefer more complex. But if it is hard to do, then you can keep it simple. Just as long as I have a way to do something meaningful in the world, and it doesn't have to be this, you're the chosen hero of, I Elder Scrolls Online bothers me so much. I hate that everybody gets fed the same line, and I hate games where everybody gets fed the same line. I like games where, you know, maybe they have a class of heroes or something. I just hate when, you know, your reputation is just fed to you, for one, and I hate when the only way you can have a reputation is if it's tied to a leaderboard of some kind. You know,
Well,
ladders, all these kinds of things. I don't even care if I have no reputation. Like, as long as I can be a guy that does something impactful in the world and nobody even ever hears about it or knows about it, I would have a blast.
But see, I would love for the NPCs to recognize my profession. Like, maybe even they would be, instead of saying, oh, he saved the town, he's the best cook, or he's the best fisherman, or whatever. When I was playing, when 3rd edition D&D first came out, I was like, I just want to be a gardener. The DM would say, oh, look, the heroes, you're a hero, the heroes have come through. And I'm like, I'm just a gardener. And yeah, I happen to have some healing skills because, you know, I'm a gardener for a temple. And so, yeah, I have some cleric abilities, but I'm a gardener. And if we could get more of that in game too, the NPCs recognizing our profession, and, you know, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of funny in this like guild concept we were creating for EverQuest Next. I was doing with my guild. I was this character that I was actually just the janitor of the Astrarium. Like I was the guy the caretaker who like just kind of cleaned things up. And I loved this idea of having this little role that, you know, I was the guy who would get to hear all the conversations, you know, that the people are having because I'm in there cleaning, you know, and stuff. So it's this unique role that, you know, and we were just planning to do fun stuff like that because to me, as a role player, I want a game to offer the ability to role play and for it to be intrinsic to the gameplay to where you don't feel like you're fighting the game to actually, you know, role play in the character. Like, I feel like that shouldn't be something you should have to do, you know. Now, obviously, nothing will ever compare to, you know, doing a MUD or doing a tabletop role play where you can really, you know, truly role play, but still, I don't want to feel like I have to battle the game to accomplish that if that's what I want to do in the game.
Why can't, other than the fact that when you're just putting text on a screen, you can say that anything happens without having to try to make it work in graphics, which is the benefit of MUDs, in my mind. There are things that happen in MUDs that that can't even be described in a 3D game because of, you know, how it's talked about. But why can't that level of direct role play, not for a huge game, but for, you know, a niche game of, you know, 300 to 400 people playing on one server, why can't that happen? Now, you just said it can't happen, and I would like to believe that it could. I know that it's so expensive to make these games. I know it's so hard, but isn't that kind of the dream that for a lot of people? Maybe only 300 or 400 people, but, you know, that's a lot.
Well, there was that game, A Tale in the Desert, that I don't know. I haven't heard about it in a long time. I'm not sure if it's still going. I assume that it is, but
yeah, it is actually.
Yeah, but they did the thing where they would restart the game. Kind of, it would have seasons to it, and every so often you would kind of get like a reset point where new players could come in, and the storyline, the events would kind of conclude and then start over again. And I think that was an interesting concept because one of the problems with the world that goes on for so long is that it gets harder and harder to get new players in because they feel so far behind. And so it's kind of an interesting concept if games have a certain reset point every so often that is like, okay, you know, the players who've been here before still have a deeper understanding of the world, and they may have certain advantages, but they're not so completely far ahead of everybody else that there's no way that you can get in there and as a new player and try to establish yourself.
That's like Crowfall's example of with Risk. You just, like, if there's no way to reset, you know, you just get these deeply entrenched powers that, you know, it just makes the game so one-sided. Or you have, like, no way to aspire even to being that because there's just no way to achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually we have one question that's related to this with role playing and RP and stuff like that, and how much people want it or don't want it in a game. Fugazi asked us if we think that players should need to do external, or should they do voluntary RP, or should it be handled by the game mechanics itself. I don't know. I'm on the fence with that one, honestly. I'm not a big, technically not a big story lore RP person, but it does have its place in a game, I think. I don't know if I'd want to be forced into so much of it, though. It's one thing that gets a little with this expansion with WoW is there's so much scenario, so much RP, so much time spent going back and forth with the characters talking to you, and it's just like, oh, I want to skip. So what do you guys think about that?
It's interesting because it really depends on the kind of player you are. Like, again, I'll reference the Old Republic because, and that's a game that's just so cutscene heavy, right? Like every quest you do, there's some amount of cutscenes. Some of them are very elaborate, and some of them are a little simpler, but you still have to go through them. And I was the kind of player who, like, that wasn't my problem with the game. I actually enjoyed the cutscenes. I thought, for the most part, for the classes I played, that they were really well done. So I didn't have an issue with that. I wasn't the click through. But, like, in WoW, previous to some of their more recent expansions, I would definitely click through stuff and, like, dude, I don't care. Just, like, I know nothing cool is going to happen. But progressively, more and more, like, WoW would start doing things where, like, wait, maybe I shouldn't just click through and run away because a character is going to do something. Or, you know, like, I always remember in which expansion had Nagrand for the first time?
Burning Crusade.
Yeah, okay. So, like, there was the thing with Thrall's grandmother, right? I think that was in Nagrand, or somewhere around there. But there was this quest, and it seemed just like a normal quest, and you brought something back, and then, like, you could run off and just go on to the next thing. But if you stood there for a second, like, the ghost of Thrall's grandmother appears and, like, comes and says some things, and you know, and when you saw it, you're like, oh man, that's so awesome. And they do that a lot more now with their current expansions. But they, you know, and it's more consistent, and that's the thing that would bug me about it in WoW before, is they were never consistent about that sort of stuff, but they've gotten better about it. But I think in general, like, whether you're going to strongly encourage roleplay or not really depends on the kind of game that you have. And there's some, like in Old Republic, I think it's almost like just part of the whole Star Wars experience that you're probably okay, like, strongly encouraging people to role play in that kind of a thing. Where other games that are much more mechanics focused or just general kind of content focused, you should just let people figure it out on their own whether they want to role play or not.
I think a big thing for having roleplay, or whether even knowing if it's good for your game or not, is, you know, kind of the source. You look at games like Lord of the Rings Online, Star Wars, these games that have these, you know, and like Revival upcoming, where they're based off of this long established, you know, IP, this thing that people got from reading books for a long time, and they're familiar with, you know, taking the time to get to know characters and watching these characters do things. And I think role-playing appeals more to people that are used to doing that. And I feel like games that have these books, you know, that have past history, and it was why, you know, doing lore books for EverQuest Next made sense to me, because when you're pursuing emergent AI and this type of, you know, environment where you're going to be making contextual actions, and what you do is going to affect and change the world, you know, it's not necessarily that you're clicking through cutscenes or anything at that point. You know, the role play is ingrained into the mechanics, and it's not forcing anybody to role play any more than it is, like, you know, people are just actually acting out their role because the mechanics kind of create that environment. And that's what I think is kind of like this ideal medium. You know, it's not forcing anybody to role play, but it's also not forcing a role player to battle game mechanics. You know, it's this happy medium where a game, and kind of the column that I posted up today right before the show is like exactly this. It's like you have a multiplayer element and you have a narrative element, and I feel like today's MMOs are just this, you know, segregated piece where you've got this element and this element, and they don't all fit together. Whereas like kind of the nature MMORPGs were first made in was this idea of, hey, this RPG environment, let's make it huge. Let's have a bunch of people in the same place. And like, I don't feel like games have done that recently. I feel like they're going that way, which is probably why I'm getting into these again. With EverQuest Next, got me. That was the game that was like on the horizon. I saw that is what kind of sucked me back into MMOs, which for the longest time I was like, I don't really have any interest in them right now. I don't like the way they are. I don't like the gameplay experience. But what I saw coming for EverQuest Next, what I see coming for for it and for Revival, those things appeal to me because it's taking roleplay and actually infusing it into the world in the mechanics, and it's allowing the people who do want to roleplay to just go like all out with it. They could go as far as they want because there's not any major systems that are really saying like, yeah, but all this other stuff is happening and it's gonna spoil your time.
Have you guys played a roleplay enforced game before, like larger scale, like an online roleplay enforced game? You guys know I talk about MUDs all the time because, there are things that can happen in MUDs that just can't happen in graphic MMORPGs, and the fact that they're a smaller audience, it allows for things to happen. But there's a type of MUD that is 100% roleplay enforced. Shadows of Isildur is the big like Lord of the Rings title in there. That's a great game, but when you make your first character in Shadows of Isildur, you have to be a human from Gondor, or you have to be an orc from Mordor. Those are your only options. And you get points as you play the game in character because it's permadeath, when your character dies. When your character dies, if you've played your character correctly, then you're given more character options, and you could potentially be a hobbit. You could, because you've proven that you do RP in this world. That kind of thing can't happen in a graphic MMORPG. Trying to enforce that just can't happen.
Well, that's so intense. I wouldn't want to see any game do that as like, hey, this is what our game does. But I would love to see games offer like an RP server that's sort of like, got a whitelist type thing where, there's maybe a GM that monitors that where people can submit, this person was, totally trolling, and they just get booted from that server and they can't be in it anymore and they have to go play on one of the other public servers. That would be amazing because, that would be the role player's dream that you could do on, on most any game out there.
Who wants that job? We're getting sued because some guy got kicked off the RP server.
I don't like either of those. I think you just do the gold server on Revival and have live storytellers in there helping people to roleplay.
True.
Make the game so that basically what you're doing is roleplaying, even when you're not trying to roleplay. That's what Revival is striving to do.
Man, I would never play that enforced roleplay stuff. I would just.
That's why I think it just needs to be this kind of like one server, like maybe they have a server. I like the concept Revival has with the gold servers. Like I think that more games would benefit from having an environment like that where people could feel like safe to, do what they want to do and not get trolled, or because I mean a lot of people are really into getting into the world and investing and, bring players back.
I think it's important that there are, like you say, kind of safe places for that. Like all power to the role players. It's just not something that, I think making a game where the mechanics of the game kind of force that is a tough sell. But if you allow it, and like you said, Alex, like making the game itself not like hitting you over the head with the lore of the world. Make a world that feels consistent, like you can understand things, and there's plenty of things you can delve into if you want to learn more about it, but just the world itself is not forcing itself down your, the story down your throat. But give the people other avenues where it's very easy to, like, oh, I can read this thing, or I can see a webcomic, or like whatever it is. Like, oh, for those people who want to learn more, give them lots to delve into, and they'll bring that back into the game through ways like whether it's, you know, them role playing a character in the world, or just talking to other players. Like, man, you should really check out the story because, you know, there's a really cool thing about this character of your same class that you'd really like, or, you know, things like that. You can get the best of both worlds, because, you know, when story gets in the way, it's not it doesn't benefit anybody.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the blog you did, I think it was a few weeks ago, you know, just really limiting your narrative to what's essential, you know, because there are a lot of people that hate, like even me, like I'm a role player, but I don't like when there's story getting in the way. Like I was playing Skyforge just the other day, and I hated that, you know, these cutscenes would come, and I'd kind of lose control of my character, you know, while I'm waiting for these cutscenes, and even though you could skip through them, you know, it was still this disruptive thing that I don't think was necessary. You know, some people like those cutscenes, some people don't, but I feel like, you know, what you wrote in that blog really made a lot of sense with, you know, restricting your narrative or just cutting it down to what makes sense for the game and what's not going to get in the way of players playing it the way they want to. So,
yeah.
Different
Let's
question?
Yeah, we
could
do.
probably
We have a
keep talking about this.
Yeah, I know. We actually had a couple.
We should go rapid fire.
questions about.
Which question are we doing
like-
next? I've got to.
The next one we had was actually from Phantom, which was, we kind of touched on the first question, which was do MMORPGs need to be on the rails for the first few experiences in order to be successful and retain an audience? We did talk a little bit about that, and we can answer it again. But the other question was, do you think that the majority of gamers would really embrace a true sandbox from the beginning, which kind of has a little bit to do with RP and what people really want in a game. And I think sandboxes are a really good way to go. It's like we were saying, it opens the doors for everyone to do kind of what they want to do. Like in H1Z1, it makes you feel you're a part of something.
I think as long as what
Go
you're
ahead.
doing at a moment, it in our conversations throughout the day, Morgard basically said, "Well, it all works until nobody wants to shovel the shit anymore." It's like, you know, as long as what you're doing in the game is something that you like doing, people don't like logging into games repeatedly to do things they don't like doing. So, as long as this open-ended experience is offering you the ability to do the things that you want to be doing, I like it being open-ended, but part of the benefit of having a LED experience is you're given what to do next. Like, we talked about Old Republic. I loved leveling in Old Republic. You know, I really enjoyed it. Did I feel like I was playing an MMORPG in the sense that we talk about them here? Maybe not. But I had a blast. I didn't feel disconnected from the cutscene. I was like, that's what I'm doing. That's what's going on. That's where I'm at in the story. But I was a consumer. And I don't see a problem with being a consumer if the game is set up that way. Now, if the game is set up as a sandbox where your interactions with other people or your interaction with the world is the experience, you got to make sure that those things that you're actually doing are fun. And that's what makes making a sandbox so much harder than making, I don't want to call it a theme park because I think it's a dumbass term, you know, a more led context. Like, if it's open, you gotta somehow limit what people are doing into a way that they go, I can do this fun thing, this fun thing, this fun thing, or this fun thing, not I have to do this thing I really don't want to do. Because then people just don't log into the sandbox.
I mean, if EQ was a sandbox, vanilla EQ, then I hate sandboxes because, you know, there's a bunch of mobs running around and you just bang on the mobs and nothing actually really changes, they're still there. I like RPGs because it's a progressive story, and I don't necessarily care if it's a led story, if it's a good story. But I think what we're supposed to be looking for with the emergent AI coming in is that the NPCs are doing stuff, and one of the first things that Dave mentioned in the EQNX debut was you're walking down the street, you see orcs are setting a farmer's barn on fire, and you make a choice if you're gonna help that farmer or not. Maybe you decide to help the orcs. That's the kind of sandbox that I want, where the NPCs are running around doing stuff. Other characters, NPCs or PCs, I don't care, but usually PCs can't count on PCs. But if the NPCs are doing stuff, and I can make a decision every day to help these NPCs, whichever it is, because there's conflict in the world. If that's a sandbox, sure, I'll go for that. But that should be changing the story, and I should be able to impact that story as we go along.
I think too that I don't know if the perceptions comes from the players or the developers or where it's coming, but I feel like a lot of people could benefit from the fact that things aren't as directed and on the rails in a lot of games, like especially when you consider something like some games you just have to have that. They're just a linear story where you literally got to be shown kind of where to go for the next thing. But I think the technology's evolved enough to the point where things like emergent AI come in and exist. The story, the sandbox is going to direct you itself. You don't need any rails because rails are everywhere. It's like being in a train station rather than being on a track, and I feel like if you're, with emergent AI, you're entering the train station. There's plenty of tracks, and you're always going to, have turns. It's almost like being on a road system, I guess, instead of a railway. There's plenty of roads to make. There's plenty of road signs. You can go anywhere, but you're not stuck on the train track, where you've only got limited options, a few tracks. You've got the whole network of roads. And I feel like that's where the technology is getting to, and I feel like it's possible. We should be able to do that. So there should be no situation where you run into like, hey, we're going to create a sandbox, but all of a sudden you're facing the fact we can't direct players around. I think that's not something that exists.
Well, I think I really like the idea of sandboxes. I think that even with a sandbox, you need to make goals clear to players so that they know that there are these things in the world. I think the best kind of tutorial experience is having somebody who knows the game sitting over your shoulder and telling you, like, hey, you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this. And I think MMOs need to get better about making those options very clear to players, not forcing them down their throats, but by consistently reinforcing, hey, remember, you could do this kind of thing, you could do this kind of thing, and letting them discover it for themselves. I think that would be a very powerful combination of making people feel like, hey, I figured this out for myself, even though the game, kind of pushed me in that direction. I think the more you can do that without, going down this checklist of, well, I killed 10 of this, I collected those things, I got these things, now I got these things. You can put that agency in the player's hands. I think that's a recipe for some long-term satisfaction on the player part.
I mean, I like the concept that I understood about the Rose song.
Yeah. I did too, but I think we're starting to wrap up here. Want to start off first by thanking Steve Denuser, we'd call him a guest, but these days he's more like a recurring co-host, willing to spend time with the lower class gamers instead of the developers, spending some time on our side. So, Steve, tell us where you're at, what you're doing now, and what you would even like to be doing.
Boy, I take a lot of baths. I shave a lot less. Sweatpants are great. That's kind of where I'm at right now. No, I'm talking to a few different companies. I can't really say anything about right now, but pursuing some opportunities. I had some good conversations. I was at GDC last week and had interactions with some very cool people and some promising things. So, man, I can't wait to get back in the job market so I don't have to hang out in places like this anymore.
We also had in chat today a great guy from Ilphonic, a snipe hunter who's been working on Revival, and they're doing a show 2 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow talking about Revival. Definitely tune in for that. And Velix, tell us about your show on Sundays.
Sunday.
Yeah, they're actually in the exact same time slot as us. So you guys are, but 1 day earlier. So if you guys are familiar with the show we do on Sunday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, that's the same time slot they're in on Saturday. So, but yeah, we I believe are going to have Ombwa on this Sunday. If not, we're planning to talk about the Call of Cthulhu book, as well as the newest dev blog we check out every week, and then we kind of try in our narrow 1 hour to hit on some really popular community topics that were up in the forums. So, and we'll do shout outs there and kind of pick some topics as we see them over the weekend. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell every show, but I believe we're going to have Ombwa on. And yeah, Snipe Hunter here in the chat, he's one of the developers. He was on our show actually last Sunday if you missed it, so you can see the replay on YouTube. So go check it out. But yeah, Snipe Hunter just confirmed he is definitely going to be there Sunday. So we will have Ombwa. And he's like their lore master, so it'll be a cool time to talk about Call of Cthulhu, which is a big influential book on that game, and it'll be fun. So he's sorry. He's a lore professional. I guess Steve is the true lore master here. So there's a conflict, man. We're gonna have to have a lore throwdown here.
Lore down.
Another show that we're starting tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We've failed miserably at offering good times for our European friends. We got some people in chat like Tazeb. Thank you so much for spending your time, your entire middle of your night here. Really appreciate it. But tomorrow at 10 a.m. got a new show. We're starting talking about contextual PvP mostly surrounding upcoming games like Camelot Unchained and Crowfall, which will have myself, Lock 6 Time, from you may know from Zam or MMORPG.com or Twitter or some other place you argued with him. Our friend Zube, who you may know from any convention you've ever been to, and he likes PvP quite a bit. And Super Fancy Unicorn, who is a Twitch streamer and actually a fiction writer who has done some game writing herself. So tune in at 10 a.m. Pretty excited to be talking about that, especially with all of the new information we've heard about Crowfall and Camelot Unchained now in their alpha stage with their recent live streams. We got, if you like MMO PvP, I think your age may be coming. But then again, I buy into the hype. You'll hear about that tomorrow morning. Before we have Noodle send us off, Diggs, anything else going on with you in the next week or so?
No. I suppose as the landmark EQ Next forums change, I might be spending more time in the Revival forums. But
My posts! My posts! Save my posts, people!
Alright, well, guys, thank you for hanging out with us today, as you do many Fridays, and of course we'll be back next Friday. As for myself, you can just find me random places on Twitter and things like that right now. My work's just gotta make stuff to live, right? So, but thanks everyone, and thank you Morgard for being on with us, and have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.